Hi, good morning. Welcome everyone to our fourth lightning talk of the week. We're very excited to welcome participants and speakers from three different universities today talking about digital literacy, podcasting, and creating fully open courses. So I'm happy to welcome you. My name is Alicia Rice. I will be moderating this session. I hail from the University of Calgary. Without further ado, I will hand it over to our first presenter, who is going to be talking about podcasting today, Nicole Neitsling from the University of Calgary.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to talk a little bit about Into the Open, which is a podcasting project that was sponsored by and brought to you by GoGN. My name is, let's see what I'll turn. My name is Nicole Neitsling, and I'm a graduate student from the Workland School of Education. I now work as an e-learning specialist and an instructional designer. And I couldn't have done this without Dr. Roberts, who's here as well. And she has a myriad of roles, but one of which is the instructional designer at Thompson River. And she was my professor and the person who really started this off. So my story of Into the Open, how I got into open education, was I was in a course that Dr. Roberts was instructing. And one of our tasks, our overall task, was to create an open educational resource. I had to write a chapter for this. This was my first taste of open. I dipped my toes in the water and got a little bit addicted to the process. And so that has led us to the podcast and what I'm doing today. So the entire structure and design of the press book and now the podcast was created by Dr. Roberts. And it was all this sort of co-designed and internal and external feedback loops. So I survived the process the first time, was really into it, and thought, I wonder if this could work in a different medium. So why podcasting? I was working internationally overseas when the pandemic hit, and I was invited to join in with a podcast of instructors in Asia. I was living in the Middle East, so they went into lockdown just before we did, and I was able to chat with them, ask them questions, get all of their ideas for online learning. So when I had to go into online learning, I was already felt like I was 3 steps ahead. Then I got to connect with all my former colleagues in South America and North America, because Middle East went into lockdown beforehand. And so I was able to pass that knowledge on. So I saw this as a way of just connecting and sharing knowledge openly. So the process that we went through, so we started off, it's very much mimics a design learning cycle. So I collected resources, did interviews with this amazing open network that was brought to me by GoGN and Dr. Roberts. So we connected, talked to everyone who knew everything about podcasting. We then refined our goals for each of the podcasts and the themes for each of the episodes, pardon me. Then I sat to recording and building and editing, produced. I ended up with 8 episodes in total. And then now we're at the stage where we're collecting some feedback on these podcasts. We're sending them out into the world, and we're developing resources for others who want to use this type of project with their students. So the episodes, we ended up with a lot of these came from questions I still had about the open educational world based on my experience creating an OER. So we started off with the beginnings, where we situate ourselves and explain the project. Sharing is caring. I got to talk to Alan Levine, who is the king of sharing and just completely the most inspirational human on the planet, I think. Talked to Helen Deward about digital literacy skills. I got to talk to Dr. Cronin, who I admire in the open world, and being able to directly ask her questions as someone who's just learning about open was, I can't even explain how amazing that was. Talked about the co-design process with Dr. Brown, who was also one of my professors at Workland School of Education. And then I got to talk to another student. So the course, I was in the first cohort, and then the second cohort went through. So I wanted to see what his experiences were like in comparison to mine. And then some tech tools, if you want to create podcasts or you're thinking, this might be a project I could do with my students. I use Zencastr to do all my recordings. The reason I use this and not Zoom is because you can separate audio from video, and it makes it a little bit easier to edit. I edited with Audacity, which is a free open source audio editing platform. And then any of the clips that I layered in, most of them came from these open source Sound Bible and Free Sounds. I've been told Vocaroo works really well as well. And lessons learned, here's the big ones. So my audio just probably went out because my internet said it was unstable. So recording high quality audio is key. I live very remotely, and so my Wi-Fi really held me back in this. If you're going to do this with students, that's one thing, a little bit of a red flag. My mic, I just used a basic headset. It wasn't anything fancy, but my Wi-Fi really was something that I had to work around. We talk a lot when we're working in open with the Pressbook. We were talking a lot about digital literacy skills for students. This also added in a layer of storytelling and digital storytelling. So if I were doing this with my own students, I would do a few courses or go through the whole process of creating anchor points and really how to express a story and tell a story through audio. Editing takes so long. If you're doing this again with students, it will take a lot longer than you think. So to develop an entire podcast series in one course is it's unlikely. So go small versus big. And then it's more than just audio. So I can see a lot of ways of incorporating. We had to do write-ups. I designed logos for the actual podcast. So that it's a really a big project that you could layer in different skills and the development of different digital skills. And then last but not least, this is into the open community. It wasn't just me and it wasn't just Dr. Roberts. There were an enormous amount of people that helped contribute to this. And I'm so lucky I got to pick their brains. Again, this is open education and the networks that it creates. I learned so much from these people. And some resources, again, I'll put the links to these in the chat or to the presentation. But these are, if you're looking at developing podcasts, these are some resources that we used. We're also collecting and compiling these for GoGN, so you'll be able to access these all there. And some podcasts we love, if you're into podcasting, my favorite one I got hooked on was Reply All, but there are a lot out there. Getting There is another one by Terry Green, who looks into open education. He's fantastic. And I think I'm good on time, so thank you. If you're still curious, my email is there, and Dr. Roberts' email is there as well. Get in contact. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. What a great presentation and connection to podcasting for education. Without further ado, I will send over to Belinda and Deanna to talk to us about open digital literacy education.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our talk on open digital literacy education for and with Northern communities. Deanna, go ahead.
Great, thank you. So I'm Deanna Townsend. It says Taylor, but either one works. And I'm a research assistant with the Digital Northwest Territories Project and an MLIS candidate here at the University of Alberta, currently residing in Treaty 6 territory.
And I'm Belinda Ongaro. I'm the project manager on Digital NWT. I'm also in Treaty 6. So a quick overview of what Digital NWT is. It consists of three main components: the digital literacy curriculum, research, and communications. We use collaborative approaches with Northwest Territory communities and organizations to learn how digital inclusion and equity can support digital literacy and innovation in diverse Northern contexts. There we go. And we employ a train the trainer model. So community educators can be equipped with the skills and knowledge that they need to run the courses in their own communities, which extends our reach and our relevance. Here's some of our partners. And our objectives today are to frame open education in a way that considers the unique context that we're working with, to engage in educational practices that best benefit the communities we serve, and to note any of the challenges that we faced in the project and how we've strived to overcome them.
So, like Nicole mentioned, she was just starting with open education, and that was certainly my experience, just starting with what open education was. And so one of the things that we looked at with the project, and of course in my own research, was looking at defining open education practices and how it's such an evolving and expanding concept, incorporating not only the open education resources that are accessible and adaptable and encourage sharing, but also practices that are iterative and feedback driven and encourage an interaction with the resources beyond course content. and of course involving learner engagement. That's both participatory and collaborative and co-created, with the reciprocal relationships involved with that foster dialogue and autonomy, and really looking at how it can be so much more innovative and engaged with the materials so that they can be personalized and contextually relevant, and adding that element of culture, which was really important for our project. So for us, it's really been a multi-directional process where there's been times of implementation that have gone back to planning and development based on the feedback that we've received. And we hope that this really continues so that the project can be just constantly reinventing itself. We used Brownwyn Haggerty and Kayla Larson as two kind of frameworks in terms of open education practices that really looked at the concept of open in a connected and innovative way. And it really resonated with the project, as they're both very culturally responsive. So in Haggerty's model, she speaks to open education as an evolving concept of open practice, and looking at diversified forms of open resources with value placed on user-generated and participatory content that can be revised and reused in really contextually relevant ways, and reflects on how that changing attitude towards intellectual property. So she has 8 attributes that speak to this, and her ideals kind of expand on what open practice can really be, looking at open relationships and connected communities that are diversified through cultural expression, and encourage really a shared and active participation in the process, in the learning process. So with this participatory culture that looks at collaborative problem solving and blended learning and co-created knowledge, it really speaks to empowering the instructor and the learner together to really look at what this praxis can look like in the classroom and outside of traditional institutions.
And the other model that we used is Kayla Larson's model, which explicitly deals with Indigenous knowledges and applies and sort of reframes Wiley's 5 R's. So this entails respect for Indigenous cultural identity, communities, and topics, relationships, which connects to the concept of all our relations and building relations with communities. And this also looks at the importance of ongoing consultation with communities when we're doing this work. Responsibility to share only when we're allowed and to publish in an ethical way while considering ownership, protocols, and community practices. And this also deals with the importance of consent. Reverence or respect for the sacred. Relevance or legitimizing and incorporating Indigenous knowledges into curriculum when it makes sense to do so. And reciprocity, which Lee defines as pertaining to generosity and sharing, and the responsibility of being concerned for others and the well-being of the community. So I will note that Larson is speaking to Indigenous knowledges, and our work does not do so outright, but it's still a very culturally engaged model that we think is relevant to our work. So I won't go into this in too much depth, but we did look at sort of all of these interconnections that we found between Larson and Haggerty and noted a few different clumps, but overall, it really just highlights the ecosystem-like nature of open education and how these things can't really exist independently or have as much value independently. It's through the intersection of these pieces that makes it really valuable. And I will say, there is a lot on community aspects, so we'll be focusing on that and some things pertaining to innovation and creativity and how this can play into relevance. And then also noting reciprocity, reflection, and peer review as informing this iterative process that we're working with. And relevance is sort of containing all of these pieces, because by doing these things better, we improve the relevance of our curriculum. So we have created our own OEP framework based on this, a kind of tentative framework, which includes community-centered, which entails respecting the community and their specific needs, showing reverence for cultures, developing relationships built on trust, and facilitating reciprocal exchanges of knowledge and experience. Reflective, which focuses on ongoing feedback and review of our practices to improve relevance. Interconnected, which is related to the community-centered facet, but places greater emphasis on the digitally networked side of things. It facilitates collaboration through technology and allows communities to establish these networks of learners and educators. Empowering, which looks at the impact of openness on learners and how we hope the experience will shape their future interactions with digital technology, and has to do with the intersections of culture and technology. And lastly, creative, which is required in order to tailor digital literacy content, but also can allow this education to thrive outside of the classroom and serve as a springboard for future critical engagement with digital technology by the learners.
So how does this all look in action kind of idea? And so using both Haggerty and Larson as a base for us, and then applying our own spin on that, I suppose, in an open framework. Digital Northwest Territories the project is really community-centered, and this ideal has been exemplified in our partnerships, the open dialogue that we've had, and the community engagement that we've really tried to foster, and has been a huge part of the success of the project. And this really began with the development of some of the curricular foundations, where everything was initiated through community consultations and connections made with community adult educators and our partners to establish the needs and relevance of this curriculum in the community, and to really come to understand the contextual elements of the community. So curriculum was developed in collaboration with our Northern contributors, just to ensure that we kept forefront the cultural respect and relevancy. And it was as fundamental as creating a definition of digital literacy that could reflect this context and be a real reflection of the community and the people of the North. And this continued through our reflective practice, where the curriculum continues to be iteratively modified based on feedback from community adult educators, learner surveys, and feedback that spoke to simplifying technical literacy concepts and ensuring that every iteration of the curriculum took contextual relevance of the community into consideration. And then the critical reflection of our team itself that was informed in curricular revisions and sharing of all the draft materials in collaborative forums, and drawing on our collective experiences. So either early consultation work or work in different contexts or our own cultural knowledges. So all of this active solicitation of feedback and the ongoing reflective nature of our work has really helped to inform all of our practices, and hoping that our content is as reflective of the community as possible. So looking at the interconnectedness of the open software, this really acknowledges that the project is not working in isolation, that we have connections with our Northern partners to inform even the technology and software choices that we made, and that there's intentional consideration about accessibility for both the delivery and potential technical constraints. So some of the choices that were made in terms of hardware were using computer for school laptops and headphones with built-in microphones and various adapter cords that were made available to all community partners and end user participants that would allow for the most number of people to engage in the project as possible. And then some of the software choices that we made, we used software such as Windows Video Editor, which it's not an open resource, but certainly was integrated into our curriculum based on what was available on the laptops. And then our curriculum has been provided to all the learners on USBs, just acknowledging the constraints and challenges that remain for downloading and internet connections in the North. So, and then our accessible formats in open formats for the curriculum, everything has been converted to LibreOffice to allow users to actively engage with the materials and then to consider relevant ways to reuse and adapt them, with attention that LibreOffice does not require a high level of expertise. And so our intent again was to have the materials the most accessible, creating opportunities for the most value for users. So then looking at empowering our open software is just considerations of technology and how learners can generate problem solving directly with the materials. So how it can be accessible and reusable and sustainable, looking at the idea of a flow-on effect where the community adult educators can expand on their skills and edit files, as well as at the course level, really empowering students to explore aspects of creating their own content. So starting with simply creating slideshows and then moving on to digital storytelling, similar to what Nicole was speaking of, but also exploring concepts of really being culturally relevant. And
yeah, so with digital storytelling, I'll just briefly touch on this. This was part of our third course. This was the main activity. And this relates to this concept of empowerment because of the feeling of accomplishment that's experienced by the learner when they successfully complete this task. And they have something to show for it. They can share it how they choose, and they have control and ownership over that final product. It also highlights the intersection of culture and technology, as using technology as a way to amplify their voices. And this supports the sustainability of a project by getting that buy-in and that excitement around technology. And lastly, the creative component of digital storytelling. So it pushes beyond that basic knowledge and application that we see in our earlier courses and takes it to that level of creative exploration. It's the creation of non-disposable artifacts as well, which is also a core OEP concept. Steps outside the confinements of the regular classroom environment and really highlights the creative potential of openly licensed material.
And of course, there's always challenges with open projects, particularly looking at connectivity and mobility. And connectivity is such a significant part of open practices, but it can be a real challenge in northern and remote communities. And so that has certainly had an impact on what we've done with the project, and having to pivot using remote training and interruptions in being accessible to the north due to COVID-19 has certainly impacted some of our connections and some of the feedback loops that we would have normally had in place. But certainly we've tried to amend that with some solutions, and some of those look like
so we added instructional videos to our course, which did serve to allow us to have that personable engagement, even though we weren't there in person. However, due to the nature of video files, it was very difficult to make these open. So that is a disadvantage here with that decision. We did try to level up the relevance of our videos for course 3 by inviting community members with experience in photography and music and other topics pertinent to digital storytelling to speak on those, and then create the videos from those interviews. And we also have crafted our curricular materials to be more easily engaged with independently by the learners. We've provided everything on USBs, as Diana said. So if courses are offered in a condensed format, they still have access to everything else from the course. And this also informed our design of the facilitator guides for the educators. We added in more pedagogical notes and more clear indication of the flow of teaching to make that a little bit easier if they weren't able to practice this with us in person. So in conclusion, OEP can be broadly defined, as we've seen. It's important that the framework being used reflects the context of the work that's being done. And this sort of framework that we've developed will continue to inform the project as it transitions to community ownership and leadership. So we have a number of resources here. If anyone's interested in them, we will share the link to the PowerPoint. And if you wish to get in touch with us or find out more about our project, you can visit our website. And this is the general email. And so if any questions are sent there, then they can be forwarded to us. And I don't know how much time we have for questions, but if we do, take it away.
Thank you so much, Belinda and Deanna. Perfect timing. Very excited to welcome our colleagues, Verena Roberts and Stephen Earle, to do our final session today. So with all due respect, we will hand it over to Steve and Verena.
I'm going to be talking about the development of an open environmental geology course. A course with this kind of title, environmental geology, is offered in most earth science departments. And I first taught a course like this about 20 years ago at Vancouver Island University, and it led to a complete reappraisal of how I lived. And so to me, it's really important. I'm doing this, working with Verena Roberts on this, and she's going to be talking to a couple of the slides. And so I will just go on to the second one, which is Verena's.
Thanks, Steve. So it's really important to highlight that this project is a joint effort between Thompson Rivers University Open Learning and the BC Campus Open Course Initiative. And that's what Steve's going to really be explaining, the difference between creating a Pressbook or an open Pressbook to support a course and developing and designing an actual open course. We just want to also say thank you and a shout out to Melanie Myers and Krista Lambert with BC Campus for their valuable input. Keep going, Steve.
Thanks. So environmental geology is a study of how geological processes impact the environment and also impact us humans. But it's also about how humans influence geological processes. And that is something that is really important because we are definitely doing that. And that's why a lot of people are calling the present geological period the Anthropocene, because we are having a dramatic effect. There's a strong emphasis on climate change in this course. And I'm going to just take that chance to say that I believe that there should be at least discussion of climate change in every course, in every faculty, and at every institution, and that there should be an enhanced emphasis on talking about climate change because it's going to affect all of us a lot. And we only had to live through the last year in BC to understand how some of those effects, what they're going to look like. Back one. The topics in this particular course: earthquakes, volcanoes, slope failures, glaciation, water resources, mineral resources, Earth systems, and all of those in the context of climate change. This is for Verena.
So the environmental geology is one of the electives that the students would choose from Thompson Rivers University as a zero textbook cost option for the Associate of Science degree. So that means they can take their whole Associate of Science degree with no cost for any textbooks. And we have been working on creating biology courses, chemistry courses, updating other courses to integrate OER, doing a lot of work with open homework systems to ensure that all the students will have the opportunity to complete this pathway without paying for any of their resources. Keep going, Steve.
Thank you. So, and for this course, there is a textbook now that exists. It's new, and it was developed through TRU. And so that's part of this course. So environmental geology, this course is a distance course that's available to students in a self-directed, continuous entry mode. They can go at their own pace. And that's not everybody's favorite delivery method. I know that. There are legitimate pedagogical reasons that it's not, but it's a viable option. And in some cases, the only option for students in remote places or with mobility issues or in full-time work or with childcare responsibilities. And you would be amazed. I mean, I teach several courses like this. Most of my students doing distance education are doing it for at least one of these reasons and in some cases for all of those reasons. And I honestly don't know how they do it. They're amazing. The open version of this course has been designed with self-direction in mind, but the course will be up on the BC Campus website, and then anybody anywhere can use the course materials to deliver the course at their institution. And they could do that with a distance model or in a classroom. So all of the stuff is there for them to use. The main features of the course, apart from the instructional manual, are the course units, which is a document, and it's in Pressbooks, that leads students into the open textbook, directing them which parts to read, which questions to focus on, exercises and videos, and then assignments that are part of the course mark. And then there's also a final exam. So some of the important features of the course are field-based activities. It's a geology course, so there's work to do in the field, and students are encouraged or directed to get out into their neighborhood or somewhere nearby and go and look for different particular geological things. In this example, we're looking at Earth systems processes. So those trees are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and turning it into leaves. They're also taking water up from that stream, and the chemicals in that water are going into the trees. The rocks are being eroded, and parts of them are being washed down to the ocean. So these are just some examples of Earth systems. Moving on. There are lots of hands-on activities, and it's my opinion that getting dirty is a critical part of learning, not just in geology. It's right up there with getting lost or being confused or making mistakes or becoming frustrated. It's important to make mistakes and get dirty and so on if you want to learn things. The course includes a number of short instructional videos. This is just an example of one of them. And so there's a whole bunch of different aspects of the course that are illustrated in short videos. Let's just stop that. And just another example of an instructional video. There are a number of H5P formative evaluations within the course so that students can test their knowledge and get feedback right away that they're understanding things. Here are a couple of examples of those. There are some online calculation tools that have been specifically written for the course that are provided so that students can get practice in working with numbers and getting output from that. And of course, there's lots of reference to First Nation perspectives and oral histories and so on. I'm going to end by saying that this course, Environmental Geology, is relevant and timely. It's interesting, it's accessible, it's important, and it's open. It's open to all. And I know all courses have most of these features, but I particularly like this one, and I want to thank you for your attention. And I will stop sharing.
So thank you so much. I know that we've had some questions in the chat about the textbook, and I'd love to open it up for questions.
I just wanted to add one thing. Working with Steve, we've had some great discussions as we transition from the Pressbook to the open course about things like assessment. What else have we covered? Like visualization, thinking about our medium. That was another one that we've talked about, Steve. So what's really important when we think about open pedagogy is how do we transition and put the student as the focus in what we're doing to design for a course, as opposed to just developing or designing a textbook. Steve, do you want to expand on any ideas there? I'm just so impressed with some of the conversations that we've had. little discussions about what I would do or what you would do or why we would do things. And so those pedagogical discussions are really interesting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as I said in the presentation, it's a student-directed, self-paced course. So it's not a cohort. Students do not have the opportunity to have discussions with other students in the course because everybody's at a different place. So they could create discussion groups, but it doesn't work that well because they're all at a different point in the course. So it's really important to get them to engage with the content. If they can't engage with other students, then they really need to get engaged with the content. And that's why we send them out to do field work. All of my courses have something like that in them. And some students love it and some students hate it because they don't want to have to go outside. And for me, both of those types of responses are really important and useful. You know, if they're hating it, well, maybe they're learning something that they wouldn't have another opportunity to learn. And if they're loving it, that's great. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Steve and Verena, for those answers. I think it's helpful for all of us. I have a question here in the chat from Lorelei about what has enrollment been like in the open version compared to other versions of the course?
So the open version is not available yet. We're just in the process of making it open. And so I can't really answer that question. And also the course as it exists right now is using a commercial textbook. We haven't transitioned the course over yet to the new open and free textbook. But I know from experience in other courses that has made quite a bit of difference in enrollment once there's a free textbook. And the textbook, you know, it's way more relevant to students than other textbooks that they might use in earth sciences. And this applies to a lot of disciplines. We've been using American textbooks forever. And this is a Canadian textbook. It's written with Canadian examples. I have another textbook, Physical Geology, that is widely used across the United States. And it's great. I feel really good about having those US students look at some Canadian examples for a change.
Absolutely. I appreciate that for a change. I don't know if any of you had a chance to click into Nicole's map, but there's already been participants from the US and from Canada. And so it's great to see some of this expanded impact, to see Steve's book in high school, to see Northwest communities engaged meaningfully in open education is just so incredibly inspiring. I know I, for one, have a lot of reading up to do over the next little bit of the afternoon. So
we just want to say thank you to U of A for all their hard work and helping us on the back end, especially with educational technology and everything to get this conference going. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to U of A. Thank you for everyone. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. We welcome you to check out the recordings when you can. So thank you.